Hello everyone, Phil here doing another video, another motherboard review. This one is the ASUS SP97-XV, a socket 7 motherboard featuring the ASUS 5598 chipset. In terms of processor support, supports all the usual processors from Intel and AMD, as well as processors from Cyrix and also IBM. In terms of memory, we have 4 SIM modules, and we can also fit 2 SD-RAM modules. The manual mentions a memory limitation of 256 megabytes, so that's pretty much as high as you can take this motherboard. In terms of slots, we have 4 ISA as well as 4 PCI slots. The BIOS chip is here. It is socketed, meaning you can use it for some BIOS hot flashing if you ever stuff something up and you have to rescue your motherboard. The latest BIOS version on the ASUS website is version 0109.005 from March 1999. Before we move on to the other bits, let's have a look at some of the jumpers. There are jumpers all over the place. We have some here, next to the chipset, up here, and over here as well. So let's have a look at what they do. Voltage support. I'll just turn my motherboard. Let's have a look at the voltage table. So it seems the lowest voltage it supports is 2.1 volts, and it goes up to 3.5. There's another table down here for the multiplier options. It seems it goes from 1.5x up to 4.5x. There's one more table here for the Frontside Bus Speed. So this motherboard supports actually quite a nice range of frontside bus clocks, going from 50 megahertz all the way up to 83.3, with a lot of steps in between. Most of you will probably just stick with the 66 megahertz frontside bus. That's the default setting for the Intel Pentium and the Pentium MMX. Okay, let's have a look. What else do we have? We have 2 RDE channels, primary and secondary, as well as a floppy port. The RDE channels support the UDMA 33 standard, and I believe that's everything we need to cover. We have a few. We have the front headers over here, as well as the BIOS battery. There's a jumper here to clear the CMOS. And that's really it. So power connectors here. It's got a CPU fan connector here, and there's another one over there. And so we're just going to turn it around and have a look at what ports we have at the back. Here we go. So we have our standard 2 PS2 ports for mouse and keyboard, 2 USBs, 2 serial, and a parallel port. And this is the onboard header connector for the VGA output, but unfortunately I was not able to get that going. And that's really it. We covered everything, so we're going to move on and do some benchmarking and see what the ASUS chipset is able to do and how it stacks up against the competition. Okay, so let's have a look at the hardware and software I'm using to benchmark these motherboards. For socket 7 hardware, I'm using a Pentium MMX 233 with 64 MB of PC100 SD RAM, a PCI S3 Trio 64V Plus graphics card, and also a PCI 3DFX Voodoo 2 graphics card with 12 MB of RAM. For the Super Socket 7 comparisons, I'm using a little bit more substantial hardware. We've got a K62 Plus with 550 MHz, 128 MB of PC133 SD RAM, and a AGB 3DFX Voodoo 3 3500. In terms of benchmarking, we have a wide range of DOS and Windows benchmarks. Superscape, we've got the PC Player benchmark, Doom shareware, Quake shareware. On the processing side, we're running SuperPi, but also Quake 2 in software mode. And just to check some gaming performance, we're using Unreal in Glide mode and Forsaken in DirectX mode, running at a fairly low resolution of 512 by 384, and therefore just finding if there are any weaknesses in the system. Okay, let's have a look at the benchmark results for the IDE controller. Once again, DMA mode worked fine. I just had to tick the box and restart the computer. In fact, it loaded every single driver for each component by default, so Windows 98 has all the drivers built in. Performance is very good. It's the second fastest in the IDE performance benchmark so far, clocking in at just under 30 megabyte per second. Okay, and this brings us to the benchmarks. Under MS-DOS, the SAS chipset seems to work really well. Across the board, green colors, so it's very fast. It only got beaten in the Quake software benchmark by just 0.2 by the gigabyte motherboard, but otherwise in MS-DOS, this is so far the fastest motherboard I've seen. Under Windows, it's not quite as good, but not too much red. There's just in Super Pi it's a little bit slower, but in the Quake 2 software, Unreal Voodoo 2 and full second Voodoo 2 benchmarks, it's right in the middle of the pack. Not too fast, not too slow. So there you have it. That was a really interesting motherboard. I was quite surprised by the performance. It left behind some of the big motherboards out there. They're quite popular, the AOpen and the Gigabyte. So yeah, I never really took much notice of SIS Socket 7 chipsets, but it seems, yeah, there's more to it, and maybe it's worth checking out a few more motherboards. Now, all the downloads, manuals, BIOS and specifications can be found on my website, philscomputerlab.com. If you enjoyed this video, or if you've got any questions, just leave me a comment in YouTube and I'll try to come back to you as soon as possible.